She posted, "A queen knows when to exit a table when respect is no longer being served," after she caused a scene and stormed out of the restaurant on my family. I replied, "Bon appetit." Then I paid for my family's meals and gave the manager her name for the unpaid bill. When the police arrived at her apartment later to charge her with theft, my ex-girlfriend, who for the purposes of this story we'll call Serafina, didn't just live her life. She curated it, she performed it. Her entire existence was a non-stop branding exercise for a product no one was actually buying: herself. Every minor inconvenience, every personal failing, every moment of basic human conflict was immediately processed, filtered, and uploaded to social media, accompanied by a quote so profound it could have been stitched onto a decorative pillow. If she was late for a date, it wasn't because she had poor time management. It was because, as she'd post later, a woman who knows her worth doesn't rush for anyone. If she spent her rent money on a ridiculously expensive handbag, it wasn't a sign of financial irresponsibility. It was, according to her feed, a brave act of investing in her own happiness. She had a quote for everything. It was like dating a living, breathing Etsy shop. For 2 years I told myself this was a charming quirk. I was in love, and love makes you an idiot. I'm a pretty straightforward guy. I'm a civil engineer. I design bridges. My job is to connect 2 points with a stable, predictable, and logical structure. Serafina's job, as far as I could tell, was to create chaos and then find a quote that framed it as an act of empowerment. We were, in retrospect, not a great match. The beginning of the end came when I decided it was time for her to meet my family. This was a step I had been putting off, not because I was ashamed of them, but because I was terrified for them. My family is the polar opposite of Serafina. They are a quiet, lovely, aggressively normal unit from the suburbs. My dad's idea of a wild time is trying a new brand of fertilizer for his roses. My mom's life passion is finding new and exciting ways to cook chicken. My sister Lisa is a high school science teacher who communicates almost exclusively through dry, sarcastic wit. They are wonderful people, and I knew that introducing Serafina to them would be like introducing a peacock into a chicken coop. There was going to be a lot of noise, a lot of feathers, and someone was going to get pecked. But we were serious, or so I thought, and this was the next logical step. Serafina treated the announcement like she'd been invited for a state dinner at Buckingham Palace. "Meeting the family," she'd said, a thoughtful look on her face. "This is a big, energetic exchange. I need to prepare. I need to make sure my aura is properly shielded." Her preparation involved 3 days of watching self-help gurus on YouTube, a new and alarmingly expensive dress, and a solid hour of sitting cross-legged on our living room floor, humming. I prepared by taking 2 aspirins and preemptively apologizing to my sister over text. The chosen venue was a nice, respectable Italian restaurant, a neutral ground. Not too fancy, not too casual. The kind of place with cloth napkins but no dress code. I figured it was the safest bet. I was wrong. The first 20 minutes were a masterclass in awkwardness. My dad tried to talk to Serafina about the traffic on the way over. She responded by telling him that she doesn't believe in traffic, as it's a manifestation of a collective anxiety mindset. My dad, a man who has commuted on the same highway for 40 years, just blinked slowly and took a long sip of water. My mom, bless her heart, tried to find common ground. "That's a beautiful necklace, Serafina," she said, smiling warmly. Serafina touched the crystal hanging around her neck. "Thank you," she said, her voice dropping into a low, mystical register. "It's a piece of raw tourmaline. It absorbs negative energy and helps to ground my spiritual frequency. It's essential for an empath like me. The world can be very loud." My sister Lisa, who had been watching this exchange with the keen interest of a biologist observing a new species, chimed in. "Wow," she said, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. "Does it work on Wi-Fi signals too? The reception in my classroom is terrible." Serafina did not appreciate the joke. A tiny, almost imperceptible frown line appeared between her brows. The queen was not amused. But the tipping point, the moment the bridge I had so carefully designed began to groan under the strain, came with the main course. My mother, in her gentle, motherly way, turned to Serafina and asked the question that would bring about the end of days. "So, Serafina," she said, cutting into her chicken parmigiana. "Tom tells us you're a creative consultant. which sounds so interesting. What sort of things do you consult on exactly? It was a perfectly normal question, a nice get-to-know-you question. But in the kingdom of Serafina, it was treason. She interpreted my mother's genuine curiosity as a challenge to her authority, a cross-examination of her very essence. Her smile tightened. She placed her fork down with a delicate, deliberate click. "What I do," she began, her voice suddenly cold, "is help people and brands align their narrative with their authentic, energetic truth. I cultivate vibes. I manage perceptions. It's not something that can be easily explained to people who are used to a more traditional, structured existence." The "you people" was silent, but it was deafening. My dad shifted in his seat. My mom's smile faltered. Lisa just raised her eyebrows, looking at me as if to say, "And you chose this?" "Oh," my mom said, clearly flustered. "That's nice." Serafina wasn't done. "It's more than nice," she said, leaning forward. "It's essential, but it requires a certain level of mutual respect and understanding, an open mind. I can tell when a space isn't conducive to that. I can feel it." And with that, she pushed her chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. She stood up, her posture regal and offended. The entire table and a few nearby tables fell silent. "I think," she announced to the room, "that I have been incredibly patient. I have tried to connect, but I cannot and will not subject my spirit to an environment of judgment and negativity." She grabbed her tiny, useless purse from the table. "I wish you all the best on your life journeys." She turned and strode out of the restaurant, a magnificent, self-important galleon sailing out of a very confused harbor. She left behind a half-eaten plate of lobster ravioli, 4 stunned members of my family, and me, sitting there with a feeling of profound, gut-wrenching dread. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then my sister Lisa cleared her throat. "Well," she said, picking up her wine glass, "she certainly knows how to make an exit. 10 out of 10 for drama, 0 out of 10 for sanity." I was mortified. I started apologizing profusely, but my dad just held up a hand. "It's not your fault, son," he said quietly. "You can't control the weather." It was in that moment of supreme public humiliation that my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new notification. I pulled it out, my hands trembling slightly with adrenaline. It was a new post from Serafina. Of course, she had probably typed it out in the rideshare on her way home. It was a selfie, artfully framed to look pensive and strong. And the caption, the glorious, predictable caption, read, "A queen knows when to exit a table when respect is no longer being served." I stared at the post. I saw the likes already starting to trickle in from her army of online sycophants. "So brave." "Protect your peace, girl." "Yes, queen." They were cheering on her temper tantrum, validating her delusion, and something inside me just snapped. The part of me that had been making excuses for her, the part that had been translating her nonsense into something palatable, just withered and died. She wasn't a quirky free spirit. She was a narcissistic toddler in a grown woman's body. And I was done. I was done cleaning up her messes. I was done being the stable foundation for her chaotic theme park. I looked at her post again. I saw the quote about the table and respect. And with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years, I typed my reply. It was a single comment, short and sweet. "Bon appetit." Then I put my phone away. The turning point was over. It was time for the execution. I called the waiter over, a young kid who looked like he'd just witnessed a car crash. "We're ready for the bill," I said calmly. "But just so we're clear, there will be 5 people on the bill, but only 4 of us are paying." The waiter looked confused. The restaurant manager, a stern-looking man named Mr. Rossi, came over. I explained the situation as simply as possible. "The woman who was sitting here," I said, pointing to Serafina's empty chair, "is my girlfriend, or, I suppose, my ex-girlfriend now. She caused that scene and left without any intention of paying for her meal. My family and I will be paying for our 4 meals right now. Her meal, the $28 lobster ravioli, is her responsibility." Mr. Rossi frowned. "Sir, if she's with your party, I understand." I cut him off politely. "But she made it very clear she is no longer with our party. She exited the table after all. However, I want to be helpful. I'm happy to provide you with her full name and home address so you can send her the bill directly. I wouldn't want your restaurant to be out of pocket because of her dramatic dining habits." I took out a pen and wrote her full name, Serafina Rosemont, and our shared apartment address on a napkin. I slid it across the table. Rossi looked at the napkin, then at me. He saw that I was completely serious. He gave a curt nod. "Very well," he said. "I paid for our 4 meals. I left a $50 tip for the waiter, writing, 'I'm so sorry' on the receipt." Then I took my family home. The next day was filled with a predictable barrage of texts from Serafina. She was furious about my bon appetit comment. It was passive-aggressive and disrespectful. She accused me of siding with my family against her. She demanded an apology. She had no idea what was coming. She genuinely believed that the extent of my retaliation was a sarcastic 2-word comment. She thought she had won. The fallout came 2 days later. I was at work when I got the call. It was Serafina, and she was hysterical. It wasn't just crying, it was a full-blown screeching meltdown. "They're here," she screamed into the phone. "The police are here. You called the cops on me. You psycho!" I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Serafina, calm down. What are you talking about?" "2 police officers are at my door. They said the restaurant Sorrento filed a report. They're charging me with theft over a plate of ravioli. This is your fault. You did this." I almost felt a pang of sympathy. Almost. But then I pictured her standing up at that table, insulting my family, and the feeling vanished. "Let me be very clear," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "I did not call the police. I paid for my meal and my family's meals. I did not, however, pay for your meal. You ordered it, you ate most of it, and then you left without paying for it. In the real world, that's not a brave act of self-respect. It's a crime. It's called theft of services, or defrauding an innkeeper. The restaurant, being a business that likes to be paid for its goods and services, called the police. This isn't my fault, Serafina. This is the natural, logical consequence of your own actions." She was speechless for a moment, just sputtering with rage. But you were supposed to handle it. You were supposed to just pay." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. Why was I supposed to do that? "Because that's what a boyfriend does. He takes care of things." "No," I said. "A partner is supposed to treat their other partner and their family with respect. A customer is supposed to pay for their food. You failed on both counts. I just stopped being your safety net. You exited the table, remember? You can't exit a table and still expect someone at that table to pay for your meal." I heard a muffled voice in the background, one of the police officers telling her they needed her to come outside. "I have to go," she whispered, her voice filled with a terror that was immensely satisfying. "They're taking me to the station." She hung up. I found out later that she wasn't arrested, but she was charged and given a summons to appear in court. She had to hire a lawyer. The whole ordeal cost her over $2,000 in legal fees, all to resolve a $28 bill she could have just paid. The charge was eventually dismissed after she paid a fine and wrote a humiliating apology letter to the restaurant. She tried to contact me a few more times. The texts were a mix of threats to sue me for emotional distress and pathetic pleas for me to help her with the legal fees. I ignored them all. I had already moved my things out of the apartment while she was busy dealing with her newfound status as a lobster-stealing fugitive. About a week later, after everything had settled down, I was having a quiet Sunday dinner at my parents' house. It was peaceful. We ate roast chicken. My dad talked about his roses. At one point, my sister Lisa looked at me, a mischievous glint in her eye. "So," she said, "any new queens in your life?" I laughed, a real genuine laugh. "No," I said, "I think I'm officially retiring from royal court duties." Later that evening, out of morbid curiosity, I checked her social media one last time. She had posted a new quote. It was a picture of a lone wolf howling at the moon. The caption read, "The strongest hearts have the most scars." I just shook my head and smiled. I blocked her number. I blocked her profile. I took a deep breath of the quiet, normal, drama-free air. It smelled like freedom. And it tasted a whole lot better than lobster ravioli.